Chapter 24 Over and Out. The 11th of March 2019, 10:15 p.m. I kept refreshing the group page throughout the evening. Mum's post had even more likes and the occasional general comment, but there was nothing new or revealing that could lead me to investigate. Nearly all of the people who had commented had long since left the area and were now residing in Hertfordshire, Surrey, Essex, or Kent. London's East End had changed beyond all recognition since the 70s and 80s. Vast swathes of old Dockland had been demolished and replaced by gleaming glass, high-rise apartments and office blocks, whose monthly rental alone would have been enough to buy a whole street in the same neck of the woods only 30 years earlier. Before many of the new high-flying residents had been born, this same land housed some of the worst slums in the country. By the time Margaret Thatcher took up her place in number 10 Downing Street, plans were already afoot to modernise and gentrify the area. "Out with the old and in with the view," boasted one local estate agent. The view would be a good one for those who could afford it, but there was no place in the new London for those who couldn't. They would have high-rises of their own, but these wouldn't overlook the river. Oh no, these would be new inner-city estates, well away from the corporate eye. People were displaced. Some moved over the river into Bermondsey or Peckham. Others, further north or east. 2 up, 2 downs were swapped for boxes in the sky. Flats, 15 floors up with piss-filled stairwells and broken lifts. Concrete jungles where the animals' feral youth congregated in gangs, all hidden under hoods, protecting their wasteland and any other means they saw fit. Drugs were a source of escapism or profit, depending on your standpoint or status. The rich got richer, and the poor were abandoned, as usual. But this made my job even harder. London was an ever-changing city, refusing to stand still. I thought about Ernie and the state he was in then. London was an easy city to get lost in. 10 million people crammed into 600 square miles, most lost in their own little worlds. A multicultural, cosmopolitan, diverse population of strangers. Even when the 70s turned into the 80s, and before communities started to become more insular and suspicious of each other, London could still be the ideal place to get lost in if you wanted to be alone. By moving out of Bethnal Green and over into South London, Ernie may as well have swapped continents, such was the reluctance of the locals to venture out the areas they knew and felt comfortable in. I suspected Ernie knew that too. Maybe it was his way of making a new life for himself, to start again. Maybe he just wanted to be on his own. Maybe he didn't know what he wanted, or what he was going to do, or how he would cope. How in control was he? And how, without help, could he fight an illness few really understood or cared about back then? Depression has only recently been commonly accepted as an illness. Even in my own younger years, you were told to snap out of it or man up, or to stop being so bloody miserable and down. People did cope, people did get by, but what mental scars did it leave? Medication has advanced and helped people deal with depression, but I doubt these comforts were available to Ernie, especially if he didn't actively seek them out. The way forward seemed to be closed to me again, Mr. Diary. Leads have dried up. I will sign off now to think. I need to create a mental plan for tomorrow, of what to do and where to go, who to approach, research. Surrey Quays has, apparently, changed beyond all recognition too, but some things are bound to remain the same since the late 70s. Libraries, social and sports clubs, daily, everyday stuff. I know I won't sleep well tonight. Good night, Mr. Diary. The 12th of the 3rd, 2019, 8:15 a.m. I didn't sleep well last night, but I have a plan. I'll start with the Docklands Museum and then make a trip to Surrey Quays Library to make a list of local services open since the late 70s to the present day. From there, I will look for names and addresses of companies responsible for housing construction in the area following the closure of the docks, as well as those who built the shopping centre and marina. I could easily find out which of these companies are still active and perhaps find out if they had an Ernie Grimshaw or a Daniel Frankenberg on their books. Considering Ernie had reached half a century and is yet to leave a paper trail, I would be surprised to find anything in his name. Looking back at images of the area that makes up Surrey Quays now and back into the 40s and 50s, one could be forgiven for wondering if this was actually the same place. Did anything survive the regeneration or the Blitz? Not much, it would seem. It seems a much more sanitised place now. Crime levels are relatively low for inner city London, and the pace of life is slower than its more manic neighbours on both sides of the river. The Docklands Museum looks interesting. A snapshot of industrial London surrounded by all that has replaced it. Reading back over my notes, I sound like a hark for the good old days that I was never even part of. Perhaps I feel I was born at the wrong time. Nostalgia is all well and good, but you can't live in the past, and things were certainly not all rosy back then. Stories from the past can be airbrushed, the bad taken out and the fun left in. Is spirit the same as survival? The good old days only seem to be good for those listening to the stories, or those who can't recall the horrors of living through the squalor and desperation. But it's fun experiencing it all through the air-conditioned halls and interactive displays of a museum with a cafe and hands-free toilets. The concept of a hands-free toilet always makes me chuckle. Maybe it's a man thing. I doubt Ernie will pop up on an interactive display or be shown playing his part rebuilding the Millwall docks on a touch-screen slideshow, but you never know. The Victoria line, then the Jubilee line, will take me to Canary Wharf, a fairly straightforward trip from West to East London on the tube. Less than an hour, I reckon. This hotel only offers a continental breakfast. Sliced meats and cheese with a yoghurt and a bowl of cereal. London pretending to be Paris. What I wouldn't give for a fry-up and a builder's tea to wake me up for the day. I'll have a good feast at lunchtime in the cafe. If I'm going to be back to my usual supermarket sandwich meal deal next week, when normality kicks in, I may as well treat myself to proper unhealthy meals and fattening desserts. Mum has been quiet. No texts or calls. Maybe she's lost interest after the initial rush. Nothing new on the Facebook group again. I'll update you after eating, Mr. Diary. Last full day in London. Hopefully by the time I board the train back north, I'll have at least taken the case into the 1980s.